This is the charts worksheet in the Tips and Tricks workbook. And we see that we have data for our return on assets, total asset turnover, and total assets. So the first thing that we're going to do is make a chart using our ROA data. And in order to do that, I'm going to use the Excel shortcuts by hitting Alt, N for insert, and N for a line chart. There's a 2D line, and let's just go with this first one. So I'm going to hit Enter. And we see a picture that looks like this. One thing that you will notice is that Excel did not assume that those were years. So if we look at this graph, we have 2018 on the left and 2007 on the right. That is not a good way to display a graph. Anytime we view a graph, we're going to assume that it's going to go in chronological order. So we need to change that. And to change it, we need to make sure that we have the right tabs available. So one thing that we'll note is that I have the chart selected. You can see what will happen if I click in a cell. If I want to activate a cell, you'll notice that the chart is no longer selected. When I select the chart or activate the chart, you'll see that there are additional tools that come up. In this case, chart tools for design and format. And I'm going to use those different tabs in order to work with this chart. In this case, I'm on the Design tab, and I need to go to the Format tab. Now that I'm at the Format tab, I'm going to select the horizontal or category axis. Then I'm going to choose Format Selection. And then I'm going to change it to a date axis. And you'll notice that on the right-hand side of Excel, we have this viewing pane for Format Axis. And you'll see under Axis Options for Axis Type, we can change it to a date axis. And when we do that, Excel automatically updates it to chronological order. Another way to do this would be to simply right-click on the axis, Format Axis, and then we could do it from there. The next thing we're going to do is format the axis for ROA to be expressed as a percentage. You'll see on the left-hand side of the chart that it shows up as a decimal. And so we're going to change that to a percentage. So again, I'm going to go up to our Format tab, or make sure I'm on our Format tab. And then we're going to go to Vertical Axis. You'll see that we have different options over here on the Format axis. We have Fill and Line, Effects, Size and Properties, and the one we're currently on, which is Axis Options. And so what we see now are the options for this axis, and we'll go down to the one at the bottom here where it says number, and we'll have to scroll down, and we're going to change that to a percentage. And you'll see that it converts it to a percentage, and I'm going to change it here for this particular graph to 0 decimal places. And so now we have a chart that has ROA on it, and if we want to add total assets, what we can do is make sure that we have the chart selected like we do here. Go to Design, select Data, and under Legend Series, we are going to add data. For series name, it's already named. So we're going to use this shortcut key here to select the range. And I'm simply going to select cell A4 with a name already in it. Then we'll go back to select the series values. And then I'll hit OK. And then OK again. And what we see is a chart that looks like this. Right? So now we have this chart that has both lines, one for total assets and one for our ROA. And you'll notice that these percentages on the left seem very odd. What happened is that the total assets level for each one of these categories is so high that it pushed down our ROA, which is in percentages or less than 1%, to where it appears to be a flat line. And so what we need to do then is we need to change the axis that data is on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first make sure that we have the chart selected like we do. We're going to go up to Format, current selection, we want to make sure that we have the series for total assets. And you'll see that it selected that series. We're going to go to series options. And we want to plot this series on the secondary axis. And you'll see that that allowed the chart to have both of those lines to where we can read both of them. And now we can format the secondary axis a little bit better. What we're going to do is select this axis. Right, so we could either select it here, or we could go to Format, Secondary Vertical Axis, and we can view this Format Axis menu. We'll go to Axis Options, scroll down till we see Number. We could change this into a number, but if we do that, it's going to look like this, and maybe that would be too many zeros here. It doesn't make sense to have 9 zeros and plus the decimal points on all of these. So instead what we can do is change our display units. And in this case, these happen to be in billions of dollars. So I'm going to click on billions. And what it does is change these units to billions. You'll notice here that it says show display units on label chart. If I remove that check mark, it will get rid of that word billions. So you could choose whichever one works best for you. So now we have a chart that looks like this. And maybe we want to insert the title for this chart. And at this point, you'll notice we do not have one. So if we were to go to Format and try to choose title here, it doesn't show up. And the reason it doesn't show up is because this only has the components of the chart that we've inserted into it. Since there is no title, we cannot format it. So what we need to do first is go to Design, Add Chart Element, chart title, and then above chart. And if I wanted to here, I could simply just start typing to change it. And you'll notice that it changes in the formula bar up top. And if I hit enter, it will adjust the chart title. In this case, I want to change the font for that chart title. And so I can simply select that text by double clicking on it, go to Times New Roman, and adjust it that way. The last thing I want to do is make sure that we can distinguish between these two lines. So right now there are two lines and we have no idea which one goes on the left axis and which one goes on the right axis. Although I suppose you could infer it because total assets can't be a negative percent. In any case, I want to insert a legend into this chart to make it a little bit easier to read. So again, you'll notice that I do not have the Chart Tools tabs on the ribbon because I have not selected that chart. So what I'm going to do is select the chart by clicking on it. I'm going to go to Design. I'm going to add a chart element. I'm going to insert a legend on the bottom. And you'll notice that because of the way that these are named, we know that ROA, which is this blue line, is the left axis, and total assets, which is this orange line, on the right axis. One other way to distinguish these two lines would be to change the line type. And so what we can do is simply click or select this series. And then on the right-hand menu, we'll see that we can change the line type. So for example, if we wanted to change the dash type, we could go to this. And anyone who's printing this document in either black and white or grayscale would be able to distinguish those lines even better. We can adjust the width of the line. We could change the color and include a custom color if we wanted to. For example, if we wanted to change this to a light gray, we could do that. And then the next thing we can do is make sure that our font is consistent, so I can simply select the chart, hold down Control and hit the letter A for all. That's going to select all. Go to Home and change the font to Times New Roman. And that's going to change all of the font on the chart to Times New Roman. And so the last thing we want to deal with is to make sure that we can print this chart effectively. And so one way would be to hold down Control and hit the letter P. And if we have our chart selected, you'll notice that it prints on its own page. And I'll hit Escape here. But what happens if we try to print if the chart is not selected? And so in this case, maybe I want to make the chart larger. Do not select the chart, hold down Control and hit the letter P. And you'll see that that chart and the data prints together. And you'll also notice that if we go to the second page, we have part of the chart here. This is the secondary axis for our level of total assets. And so what happened here is you saw probably the print preview lines. This dotted line shows us where the pages are going to end in Excel. And so maybe a better way to do this is to move this chart into its own sheet. And so what I'm going to do is select this chart, right-click on the chart, go to Move Chart, and I'm going to make it its own sheet. And maybe I'm going to rename that chart ROA and Total Assets. And then I'll select OK, and we'll see that it moved to its own chart. And one of the advantages to having the chart as its own sheet, anytime I hit Control P, you can see that the chart prints as a full page. Before, we will remember that the print didn't cover the full page. Another advantage is that I could insert additional features into this chart. For example, if I went to the Insert tab and text, there may be things there that might be helpful to us. And now we have an Excel chart for ROA and total assets with consistent font, a secondary axis, chronological order, with two different types of lines in its own sheet that makes it easy to print.